Hello and welcome to the Horror Screams podcast, an extension of the Horror Screams Video Vault Network. I'm your host, Stephen, and I'm here today with Sarah.
Hello there.
Hi, how's it going, Sarah?
It's all going good. Yeah, it's like another year. We had a month off, didn't we, to recoup?
Yes, a month off for good behaviour, as it was
Yep.
said. Yes, that was us. Yeah, January was off, and we're
Now we're
back in
back.
February. Yes, episode 16, if you can believe that.
Woohoo!
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you're listening from somewhere that isn't England, you're probably in the same situation as us, which is we're locked down like squirrels, and have been since I don't know. It feels a while.
Yeah, feels like
It's
forever.
Is it lockdown 3 or 4? Does it matter what number lockdown it is? I can't keep
It,
track. I don't know.
it all blends into one. It's like 2020 is just happening all over again.
Yeah, and although I do think I don't know, I think we'll look back and say, oh, that original lockdown, that was the original and best because it was always sunny. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, it might not
true.
have been in your country of choice if you're not from here, but in England during the original and best lockdown,
Yeah.
the great thing was that every day you got up and like, Jesus Christ, it's like a revelation. It's a revolution. Blue skies, no one around, people
Yeah.
genuinely only out walking the dog or the squirrel or whatever. And yeah, and now it's been a bit gloomy and wintry.
But yeah, very snowy.
Yeah, we've had snow, proper snow, right? It was like
Yeah.
real bona fide snow, which we don't get much in England. Um, yeah, but we're all okay and we're hunkered down in our retrospective bunkers, and that's the main thing. I think that we're safe. And that's the other thing. You see anybody now, oh, have a little chit chat if you see them across the road, and it always has to end with, "Oh, see you later, stay safe." When did that become a thing? I mean, they're just going straight back home.
Yeah. That's the new greeting and new see you later. Stay safe.
Yes. Yeah, the new greeting is slightly different as well. It's like, oh, how have you been? Given everything. Oh, yeah, all right, thanks. At home the entire time, perfectly safe, thanks. Um, and now it's a slightly sinister, oh, take care of yourself over the coming weeks. What the fuck? What do
Mm.
you know that's going to happen to me? So it's all very sinister. Um, but obviously, we're safe. We're in Norfolk and we have very strong genes from generations of inbreeding.
Absolutely.
Um,
So we're all actually fine over
yes.
here.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's the main thing. We have an exciting episode. As Sarah said, we've not been around since December when we did our Christmas Silent Night, Deadly Night special, which hopefully you enjoyed. We're here today to talk about REC,
Woohoo!
the quartet of Spanish horror films from what I assumed was only a couple of years ago, but turns out it's from ages ago. Starting in 2007 was the original REC, which is astonishing that it's so long ago. So we're going to be celebrating those 4 films, 4 quite different films, really. Certainly a difference between 1, 2, 3, and 4 as they go along, and an interesting bunch as well. We'll touch on the remakes in America. But before we do so, tradition is just a little look at some of the stuff we've seen recently, whether it be TV, movies, or anything at all, really. So, Sarah, since the last podcast, have you seen anything good or interesting?
I certainly have, but I've only got a couple I want to mention.
Oh,
I've kind of got a couple. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but yeah, I'm going to go through a couple of them. One was a series that I watched on Netflix called Sweet Home.
hmm.
It's a South Korean TV series about a kind of a whole bunch of residents in an apartment block, and the whole nation gets hit by a curse or an infection that then spreads throughout everyone. Everyone kind of gets it, but sometimes it takes longer to change people than others, and it turns people into monsters, not zombies, but
Hmm.
monsters, like proper monsters. You get everyone turns into something different as well, and there's some a lot of CGI effects, some better than others. It starts off really good. The first few episodes, I couldn't stop. I had to keep binge watching, but unfortunately,
Yeah.
it kind of like peters out towards the end. It kind of goes away from the monsters and becomes a little bit more about personal things, which is fine. But they're because it's overdubbed as well and no subtitles and stuff. There's
Ah.
a different kind of feeling to it, and you don't really quite get into as much, and the ending is a bit dodgy. But yeah, that was an okay little series.
Nice. That's Sweet Home, yeah?
Yeah, on
Hmm.
Netflix.
Okay. It does look interesting. That's cool. Some of the South Korean stuff is really, really good, isn't it? Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I say, this one starts off strong and kind of peters out a little bit towards the end. It would probably been better if they'd have condensed it into like, I don't know, what, 5 or 6 episodes rather than 10.
Yes. And that is often the way at the moment. There's
Mm,
5 strong hours in a 10-hour show or something.
mm,
I see that quite a lot. Okay, interesting.
mm. The next one was a movie on Shudder called Fingers by Juan Ortiz.
Ah.
That came out in 2019, apparently. But I don't know how long it's been on Shudder. I was just kind of in one of those moods where I wanted to watch something, but I didn't know what I wanted to watch. So I just kind of went onto Shudder and started flicking through, and that just caught my eye. So I went, yeah, I'm going to go for that one. And it was really weird. Oh, it had horrendous reviews on IMDb as well, which was another reason why I wanted to watch it.
Yes.
It's like, I'm going to prove these people wrong. They're saying, "Oh my god, this film is really rubbish." It's like, okay, I'll give it a go. But it is great. It is hilarious. It's weird, absolutely bizarre. It's about a woman who has a massive phobia. Like, if anyone has anything slightly wrong with them, she will completely freak out. And she comes into work one day, and one of her work colleagues has had one of his fingers cut off, and she just flips her lid. And then he keeps coming in, like the day after that he's got another one missing and another one, and she starts to like just completely freak out. She goes to like a psychiatrist who tells her she has to like face her fears, so she basically stalks the guy whose fingers are getting, well, he says he's like had a he's got a table saw and he's had an accident, but she thinks something else. So she goes to his house and finds out that he's actually being threatened by someone who is like slowly, taking his fingers off day by day. And this someone is the very awesome Jeremy Gardner from The Battery.
Oh, he's great.
He is mental in this, absolutely mental. He's called Talkie Panda. He doesn't actually have a proper character name because he wears a kind of like panda balaclava and stuff. But yeah, it is really great because the woman then starts threatening Talkie Panda and stuff like that, and it all goes completely nuts. He freaks out, she freaks out, and the ending is just brilliant. It's really funny. I think people need to give it more of a go.
Yeah, I'm actually because I did have Shadow and I stopped it for a while because I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll give it a rest because I didn't really get around to watching it. But I think I might subscribe to it again just for fingers. It sounds great.
Seriously, I think you would love it. That's right up your street. It's messed up, but it's hilarious as well at the same time. Really, really good,
Mm.
and he's just great. I love Jeremy Gardner.
Yeah, no, he's terrific. Have you seen After Midnight yet?
No, not yet. I've still got it, but I
Oh,
still have to watch it, and I will at some point
yeah.
soon.
I mean, I came really late to the Battery. I didn't see the Battery until
Mm,
weirdly after Midnight. I think I told you last
mm.
year. And I don't know why I never watched The Battery. I just didn't. And I thought
Ah,
After Midnight was so great, and I watched The Battery and I thought, wow, I wish I'd have seen this years ago because The Battery is
mm.
even better. But
It's
After Midnight is
brilliant.
something special as well. Yeah, great talent, man. Cool. Ah, Fingers
Yeah.
is on my list for sure.
Yay, excellent. And then the other two random ones I've seen was I watched the big disaster movie that's on Prime, Greenland, with Gerard Butler.
Cool.
Big end of the world meteor is crashing into the earth, and he basically has to try and get his family to Greenland, where there's a big underground bunker. And it's kind of, yeah, it's not your normal follow along the same story throughout the whole film. There's kind of sections to the story where they get split up, and then they have to go and visit family. They get refused to go places and stuff. Yeah, lots of action, lots of big bangs, and lots of violence and stuff on the street. People raiding
Hmm.
pharmacies and stuff, thinking it's the end of the world. Some great effects and stuff. Yeah, I was quite impressed with that. It is quite a long film,
Yeah.
but yeah, really good.
Am I right in thinking it's like it's more of a darker, more serious thing than the rah rah kind of "Go America" of
Oh yeah,
Armageddon or something like that. Yeah,
yeah. It's not like, oh, Gerard Butler's this big hero. You know,
yeah,
it's more personable, and stuff happens, and you really feel for him and his family.
yeah. Because I like disaster movies a lot, but I did get a bit turned off by some of them. I
Mm.
like the '70s ones very much, and I like Deep Impact and a
Hmm.
few of the others. I was interested in this one. Yeah, I will give that a
Yeah,
look, I think.
it's more along those lines.
Nice.
Definitely better than one that we both unfortunately saw, which was Songbird. They kind of like just kind of ruined it with the trailer, didn't they? That you think by from the watching the trailer, it's going to be so much more than it is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. I thought Songbird was just awful. Oh, I just, and I was really looking forward to it as well because it seemed to have a lot going for it. I thought this is going to be proper grim. I really want to watch something grim in these not at all grim times. And it's by horror guys. It's by Adam Mason and Simon Boyes, who did a few horror movies a few years ago. The British guys that got this job for Michael Bay, who's the producer. And it's got a random all-star cast, hasn't it? With like Demi Moore and
Oh
what's that
God,
guy
yeah,
from Cabin in the Woods? Bradley Whitford, I think.
yep,
Um, and someone else and thingy and Peter Stamari. That's the other guy who
yes.
who is
I quite
cast
liked
as
him.
always as a nutter. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah,
He's a great nutter.
yeah,
Um, but it turns out to be no more edgy or dark than something like Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor. Because by the end,
mm.
sorry to interrupt your
No,
own
you're
recently
fine.
seen. It's just that I'm so upset by this. But by the end, someone genuinely says the line, "Oh, because he's a delivery driver. Oh, we don't just deliver parcels. Pause. We deliver hope." No, no, you don't. No. So yeah, that's such a terrible line, and I think it sums up the movie really. It should have been something relevant, but it was just this sappy kind of future version of coronavirus. It was much scarier.
Yeah,
Strangely, I mean, the movie was out of date straight away because by the time the movie came out to Prime, the newspapers already sounded like a zombie movie.
yeah,
Coronavirus mutation
yeah, yeah.
suddenly had more edge than a sappy piece of shit like Songbird. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely didn't live up to expectations. I don't think I hated it quite as much as you, but I didn't really go in. I watched the trailer one. My other half went, "Oh, look, this looks like that would be right up your street." I was like,
Yeah.
"Hmm, okay, infections. Yep, yep, go with that."
It ticks all the
And that
boxes.
I didn't think much more of it, and then started watching and was just like, "Oh, you know what? This is a little bit too mushy." I think that's all it was for me. Was too mushy.
Yeah. And I don't mind Mushy if you actually like the characters, but these were a pair of like catwalk models or something. They were
Yeah,
awful.
yeah.
Who's going to root for them? They'd be the first people we'd stove their head in with a long piece of wood just to get to some snacks from the what used to be Morrison's.
Yeah, they do
Um,
look like the new version of Brad and Angelina, don't they?
and they survive. Oh, spoiler alert! They
Yeah.
survive.
Surprise,
Yeah.
surprise.
Yeah, and it's got such a good cast, and I felt a bit sorry for people like Demi Moore, who probably was just grateful for the work, to be honest.
Yeah, she looked
But
old, bless her.
yeah, has it been that long since
I
Ghost?
know.
Did we
That's what.
miss something? For us, what happened?
Yeah.
These 30 years have been a blur. But
Mm.
yeah, sorry, Sarah. Anything else you've
Yeah.
seen?
No, that is it for me. My recently seen is done.
Cool. Well, that's good. I'm really excited about Fingers, so
Yes,
I'll try and watch that before the next podcast because I like the sound of that.
definitely. Everyone needs to watch Fingers.
That's cool. Shudder, as we said loads of times last year, have brought out some interesting stuff. I think they've got a new one out this week called Shook, which is
Ooh.
what sounds a bit like a hosty kind of. I didn't read much about it, but a hosty kind of online based, laptop based kind of. Not sure if it's Zoom based, but it's one of those. So
Okay.
based on Host being so good, I would never write off one of those movies because you
No, but
never
is it
know.
too soon?
Well, there is that. There is part of me that's thinking, hang on a minute, you had a big hit with Host.
Yeah,
Um, Makes
this
you
is just going
wonder.
to
I
be
don't
a
know how
bit of
many
a
times it can
wannabe.
work.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's a limited formula, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
As indeed is the formula behind the Rec films, which we'll talk about later. It's something that you can do so many times before you start thinking, oh, yeah, okay, it's this again.
Yeah.
But you never know. You never know. So yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a huge amount of new stuff recently. I will mention a couple of really good documentaries. There's a great one actually called Inmate Number One, which is all about Danny Trejo,
Oh,
and
nice.
this is really really good. If you love Danny Trejo, then you need to see Inmate Number One.
Who doesn't?
And
How
this
can you
guy,
not love him?
it's brilliant. He turned up in the most random stuff. I went to see the Dora the Explorer movie with my daughter last year, and Danny Trejo's in that.
Of course
Um,
he is.
he's in Spy Kids, and the documentary is it's on Sky. It's I think I saw it on Sky Documentaries or something like that, but it's available. And the guy is in his late 70s now, which is amazing. And he's got, apparently the documentary says he's got like 400 IMDb credits.
Mm.
And they talk to him on the set of a movie, and he doesn't know the title of the movie. He's got no idea. What are you making at the moment? I'm not sure. And because he makes so many,
Yeah.
and he loves the work. He just wants to be working, and it's a great story. I mean, it's very frank about how he grew up in a rough Mexican neighborhood in California. He was taking heroin or shooting up with heroin at the age of 12, and he had this, and he was doing loads of what do you call them, 7-Eleven robberies. He was the guy with the sawn off shotgun in the corner shop, and he went to jail, and he turned it all around. He came back. He got out of jail at some point. I can't remember when, and lots of things inspired him to go, hey, okay, I'm going to do something good. And he got into acting, and he used his experience in jail to be technical advisors on movies like Runaway Train and Heat. And I'd forgotten he was in Heat, actually, has a fairly big role in Heat. And he fell in with people like Robert Rodriguez, and he played great roles in things like From Dusk Till Dawn and Desperado. And the movie is all about, his rise in Hollywood, but he never forgets his roots. So it basically shows him in between making like 20 films a month or something. He's gone back to his hometown, and he's helping people that are in jail. He's helping them to go back into society. He's helping drug addicts. So he's basically thinking, well, I terrorized this town when I was 16, so now I'm going to actually do something good for them instead. But he's not sappy. He's not sentimental about it. He's a straight talking guy, and you come away from it loving him even more.
Oh.
And hearing how excited he was to get the title role in Machete,
Oh.
starring with Robert De Niro, is something really special. So yeah, Inmate Number One. If you don't like Danny Trejo, then you should, because he's obviously a legend. And documentary is just a great peek behind the curtain of someone that you take for granted, because he's in everything. He turns up in so many films, some big,
So
some
many.
these straight to video movies.
Yep.
But he treats them all the same. It's a job.
Mm-hmm.
He has fun with it, takes the money, uses it for good things. So yeah,
Yay.
check
And
it out.
does the old El Paso adverts.
Yes, he's done so much mad random stuff. Yes. Yeah, that it touches upon that as well. He's got his own brand of taco. Yeah, it's
That's
mental.
it, yeah. He's great. Love him.
He's great. A couple of other brief ones. I saw a movie called Shirley, which is not as unexciting as it sounds. It's about Shirley Jackson, the horror writer, who wrote The Haunting of Hill House, which became a great movie in the 60s, and of course recently became the TV series on Netflix. Although the TV series isn't very much Shirley Jackson, it's more Stephen King. And Shirley, although on the surface sounds a bit boring, is actually really good. I mean, it's a snapshot of her life in the 50s with her husband, and it's almost shot and edited like a horror movie itself. It's very unsettling, and she's not very sympathetic. She's played as this kind of agoraphobic, paranoid, slightly strange woman who's got an adulterous husband, and in town they think she might be a witch. It's a very interesting film. It's got a weird, creepy score. So although it's sort of a biography or a biopic, it's also at the same time this unsettling story of a woman that's possibly having some kind of mental breakdown. I really liked it, and it's got the great Elizabeth Moss, who was so good in The Invisible Man last year, and is apparently great in The Handmaid's Tale on TV. And it's well worth a watch, especially if you're interested in horror writers, or especially if you're interested in Shirley Jackson's work. And the last thing was one more documentary, which is Tales of the Uncanny, which is a really good documentary about horror anthologies through the years. So David Gregory made it, and he started off in a normal fashion, but was rudely interrupted by the coronavirus. So what became a normal documentary ended up being mostly a documentary made on Zoom. So
Okay.
what that meant in a good way is that he basically got loads more people he would never have got if he'd have gone around the house and shoved a microphone in their face. So he got a massive amount of people, from Richard Stanley to Joe Dante. The Zoom thing doesn't affect it too much, although there's an interview with Kim Newman that sounds like he's possibly broadcasting from the moon, like speaking into tin cans or something. So like, Kim, are you there? But it's a great guide to horror anthology. So it covers loads of old stuff, but it goes right up to date with the Creepshow TV series, with lots of stuff in between, like From a Whisper to a Scream, Trick or Treat, Dead of Night, the Amicus films, and the Creepshow movies of the 80s. They get a big shout out.
Oh, nice.
So it's well worth watching, especially if you like that kind of horror movie where it's 4 stories in one and such like. And it's great affection and a huge amount of talking heads, like 60 people, directors, actors, etc., were involved in the end, thanks to the magic of Zoom.
Yeah, so, I'm just kind of like looking through as you're talking about it, and notice it's got like Reece Shearsmith and Mark Gatiss and stuff in it as well.
They're lovely. Yeah, they're really lovely. Yeah, they're great. I mean, at the end of the film, everybody involved basically picks their favorite individual story and their favorite anthology movie, and then they combine the results to come up with what would be the ultimate anthology if the best episodes were put into one film. And what they choose is great. But Reece Shearsmith and Mark Gatiss are really fun, and they're talking very much with great love about like the 70s stuff, like Tales from the Crypt and From Beyond the Grave. So yeah, that's one of the highlights. Definitely worth a look. It's I got it on a US Blu-ray, but I'm guessing it will be out over here in some format, most likely on streaming very soon, I'd imagine. So
cool.
Yeah,
good stuff.
So that was that, and we're back with some more stuff that we've seen next time, of course. But now it is actually time to dwell on something that is, when I rewatched this, actually is a little close to the bone these days, which is the Rec films. So yeah, there's 4 of them, and we're going to be going through all 4 over the next period. So it all begins, I guess, in 2007 with Rec. REC in closed square brackets is the right way to say it.
Yes.
So unusual series, really. The first 2 films are directed by 2 directors, which is Jaime Balaguero and Paco Plaza. So Balaguero's made some great stuff. I don't know if you've seen, but he's done some really, really creepy ghost story type things like Fragile, and there's one called Darkness. Also did a great adaptation of Ramsey Campbell's The Nameless, which is one of the creepiest things I saw in that kind of early 2000s. And Paco Plaza, I can't remember too much, but I know he did that decent werewolf film with Julian Sands called Tales of Roma Santa. So interesting pair. They co-directed Rec, and it was in that period, 2007-ish, where there seemed to be a lot of interesting Spanish language horror movies coming out. Things like Devil's Backbone were perhaps more famous, and The Orphanage later on. So they were kind of part of that charge of Spanish horror. And Rec is this very short, it's like an hour and a quarter, very intense, I suppose, a great example of containment cinema, where the whole thing more or less takes place in a single location inside this big Barcelona apartment building. Has to be said, it's not entirely original. Like, if you look at stuff that came before it, it's dealing with a style that reminds me of things like Ghostwatch, and also there's a great episode of X-Files called X-Cops, which is where the crew of the TV series Cops follows, which is a real TV series made by Fox, follows Mulder and Scully around on a creepy supernatural investigation. So the camera crew's following them around while they're investigating what might be a werewolf or a shapeshifter. So this is similar to that. So basically, I'm sure you've seen it, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this show, which is going to spoil it. But it's a first-person horror. Angela is the heroine. She's the host of this show called While You're Asleep, and it's a reality TV show, which in 2007 was relatively new, very fashionable. Yep. And she's following a couple of firemen on their rounds through the city. And So it's effectively a found footage thing, although the footage isn't really found, it's just shown to us. We don't know. No one found it as such. It's just footage. So she's following them around, and there's a nice kind of light-hearted intro where they're kind of fooling around, and all the firemen seem excited to see her. And they're setting up just how dull their job is. Oh, the knight will probably be rescuing a pet from a tree, something like that. But instead, wouldn't you know it, this kind of alert call from a strange screaming old cat lady suggests that some bad stuff is going down in this big apartment building. And of course, the whole evening is filmed, as it has to be, otherwise there would be no film. And we quickly realised that there's an infection in the building, which is spreading mightily quick. And I have to say, rewatching it, I mean, I saw this in the cinema whenever it came out in the UK, probably 2008-ish, and it was really intense then, and it really holds up, doesn't it? It's it never. I mean, it has this small intro where it's quite lighthearted, but once it gets going, it's pretty full on.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of like Resident Evil or some kind of video game or something in places, isn't it?
Yes, entirely. Yeah, and definitely by the time you get to Rec 2, that's very much the kind of first person shooter, like the helmet cams, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's got that, and it's not too off-putting. I mean, there was a whole divide back in the early 2000s, I suppose, after Blair Witch, of people that found the shaky cam a real turn-off. Obviously, even in a desperate situation, most people would put the camera down. So you have to kind of accept that and move on. You have to accept that. I mean, in Rec does a good job of various people saying, turn off the camera.
Yeah.
And I think that's needed. Although you either buy into this stuff or you don't. You know, if you buy into the Blair Witch Project, it's terrifying. If you think they're stupid and they should have just put the camera away, then it doesn't work. So here I don't notice that too much. But it is, as you said, it's got a degree of part video game. It's it also seems to me to be, even though, which we'll talk about, it's not technically zombies, it feels to me to be very much a Romero vision where this is just one example of something that will become much bigger. It's an apocalyptic film ultimately, especially by the time you get to Rec 2. And it's also got the fact that the people outside supposedly containing the problem may well be as threatening as the problem inside, these faceless figures of authority.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the plastic draped over the building and the panic surrounding it, the video feeds and the news reports and stuff, and you know, no one's getting told anything inside, and it's just turning slowly into carnage. I love the fact with the setting and stuff, how it starts off all quite grand, and you know, it's a pretty building, isn't it? And then as stuff starts to go on, the blood is literally like dripping off the walls and down the stairs and stuff.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. The building's very modern and very interesting. Yeah, I think so. It just escalates. I mean, it's
very
it's great to see. Yeah, absolutely. I moan a lot about films being too long, but I think the great found footage films, and this is one of them, I think they are sensible because they are like Blair Witch is the same. They are in and out in an hour and 20 minutes or so, and it doesn't give you really much time to question things.
No. And
feels to me. Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say, you know, it once they discover the woman, and she attacks like the cop and stuff, and then everyone starts panicking down in the lobby, and then you just have the fireman gets dropped down the stairwell. That proper puts you into a panic, doesn't it? You feel everyone's panic as to what the hell's just happened as he just smacks onto the floor from like 3 or 4 floors up.
That's a great moment.
That's when it kind of hits everyone that something's not right. And I love, like you say, are they zombies? Are they not zombies? There's so many different stories within Rec that tells you that they are, but they're a different kind of zombie. You know, is it rabies? Later on, you get the whole story, the religious story. You know, the possession story as well. And you're never too sure. Some people are bitten by dogs, and then there's this whole thing up in the penthouse, which I'm sorry you're probably getting to, and I'm jumping ahead now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it's very much that. I mean, the first half at least is, as far as we're concerned, this is. I mean, it's coming quite soon after 28 Days Later, where the same argument is. You know, They're almost rabid
Mm.
victims of this. In that case, the rage virus. In this case, something which is spreading very quickly in a similar way. It's not airborne; it's spread by saliva and blood, isn't it?
Hmm.
And so it's similar. But as far as we're concerned, from regular horror viewers, we're looking at kind of the fast-moving zombies,
Mm.
like it or not, the term that we've seen
Yeah.
in things like Nightmare City before and other films. And indeed, the remake of Dawn of the Dead, which was a
Hmm.
few years before this. So, so yeah, it's either way. I mean, it's so intense. It does have, I suppose, a lot of the gory visuals of a zombie film. So there's some neck biting, there's open wounds that you see, but you see them very quickly, which I think makes them more horrifying because it does feel like they're catching this horrible stuff on the go, which obviously
Mm.
is the whole idea. So it does. It's not particularly gory, but when there's a gory moment, it's quite shocking. Um, and it's also really fearless. I mean, there's a whole thing with the like the 7-year-old kid that's involved,
Yeah.
um, which um, basically no one's safe in Rec, whether it's Angela
Hmm.
or the child or the dog. You know, people that would normally be safe in perhaps a big budget Hollywood version of this same story, you can't bet on the fact that they're going to survive. And in fact, everybody seems doomed because
Mm.
this is a situation spiraling way out of control very quickly. Um, and I think it's there's some quite good local color. I quite like the very few moments when it slows down and they talk to some of the residents. I quite like those scenes.
Yes,
Um,
there's some great characters. I love Caesar, the
yeah,
really racist guy.
yes, I've forgotten his name. That's it. Yeah, he goes off on one about the Chinese, doesn't
Yeah.
he? um, and those moments, I think, a bit like actually the very start of the Blair Witch Project, where they interview local people, and it's quite funny because you feel like you could go to any small town and you get the same reaction in real life. But I like the fact that he's also a bit self-conscious and he wants a profile shot because he thinks that's the best view of his face.
Yeah, is his hair
uh,
all right and stuff?
his
Yeah.
hair. So I think the movie does a great job of getting a few character beats in because you kind of like Angela. You see enough of her to root for
Yeah.
her, and the fireman. It's quite shocking when Alex falls off comes off the balcony.
Hmm.
Um, but it doesn't need to get bogged down in their backstory. It's all about keeping the momentum going. Um, but yeah, watching it now is quite weird. I mean, it's obviously disturbing. Although to be honest, I think it was disturbing even then. I think there were a bunch of movies that came out after 9/11 where there was a real sense of paranoia, and films like this play into that, whether it's oh Christ, this could be a biological terrorist attack, or is it some kind of chemical thing.
Hmm.
um, and this is part of that. It's in a big building in a major city and something weird is going down and nobody understands what it is. So there's that sense of what we all kind of watched in 2001 live on TV is filtering into this, even if it becomes obviously zombie stroke possession movie by the end. It's still quite
Hmm.
disturbing. Yeah, I mean it truly holds up, man. It's quite something. um The Crazies is a movie I think that it reminds me of as well.
Yeah,
Talking of
sure.
Romero,
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of line rather than like his typical Dawn of the Dead type zombies.
yeah, I think so. It's that distrust, isn't it, of the people that have come to save you. The same is true in Cronenberg, like Rabid,
Hmm.
where some of the scariest stuff just involves people in hazmat suits. you know,
Yeah.
um, so inside you're not safe, but we're really trusting these guys that are armed, heavily armed, and are willing to kill us to keep this infection under control. It's that. Um, the two alternatives you've got is to stay in and face the worst, or go out and possibly be shot in the head.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, they
and
have
so
that kind of crossover because they have the guy in the hazmat suit and stuff go into the building, don't you? That's when you kind of like beginning to realize. I mean, they're still thinking that it's a infection type thing, like a rabies thing, and it isn't until all hell breaks loose. The guy in the suit gets killed, and they end up having to,
yeah,
rather than going down to get out, they have to keep going up to get away from the infected. And that's when they kind of discover the penthouse.
which is a great device, isn't it? The fact that
Mm,
they can't go out, they can't go down, they have to go up. They have to,
mm.
I think that's a great way of keeping the peril up.
Yeah,
Um,
everyone keeps saying that the guy doesn't live there anymore or it's empty up there, so they all thinking going up there is a good idea.
yes, but it called to mind, like it does call to mind all those arguments in Night of the Living Dead, where it's, those guys are saying, let's go in the cellar. Those guys are saying, no, we've obviously got to try and get out. And the horrible irony of what happens to Ben at the end.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, entirely that. Um, and it's a very disturbing path to that. I mean, I don't know, it's maybe slightly off tangent, but I do think this is a better film than 28 Days Later. I think it's a better horror
Yeah.
film because I
Hmm.
think it's scary all the way through. I don't think it's
Yeah.
afraid of being a horror film.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I think once they're up in the penthouse, things get scarier when they go into the night vision type thing and claustrophobia of it
Yes.
all. Whereas once you've got to that part in 28 Days Later, you kind of know what's going on and you kind of relax to it. Whereas in this, you're not.
Yes. Yeah, entirely. Yeah. The longer it goes on, the more disturbing it gets and the more claustrophobic it gets because they
Mm.
are literally holed up at that most horrifying part of the building. And how about that finale? I mean, the last, I kind of remember this in the cinema thinking, wow, but the last 20 minutes or so of Wreck is great, isn't it?
Yeah, I never got to see it at the cinema. I think if I did, I would probably have pooed my pants towards the end, definitely. I would have been jumping up and down in my seat on various occasions.
I think it's up there with some of the great scenes in horror, really, the finale of this.
Mm,
Um, it's truly terrifying. I remember the attic scene in The Exorcist is really, really scary, where
yeah.
almost nothing happens. It's more of a kind of misdirect. So I get a bit of that. I also get a bit, you mentioned night vision, I also get a strong echo of the finale of Silence of the Lambs,
Eh,
where Clarice is fumbling around and Buffalo Bill has the night vision goggles, so he's the only
mm.
one that can see properly. And here is his name Pablo, I think, that she's with at
Yeah,
the
the
end.
cameraman, yeah.
Yeah, so he can see more than she can, and the audience knows that. They're absolutely horrifying. Now, the problem with the character in the horrible character in Wreck is I get it wrong, and I immediately think it's Glenn Medeiros, the 80s pop singer who had a number one hit with "Nothing's Going to Change My Love for You."
Nick,
Although
close, close.
not as horrifying as Glenn Medeiros. Had it
No.
been Glenn Medeiros in the attic, I think it would have been even more harrowing, especially if he'd have carried on performing that song, which was number one
Yeah.
for 300 years. What is her first name in
It's
Wreck? It's not
it's
Glenn.
no, it's not Glenn, it's Tristana.
Okay,
Tristana
excellent.
Medeiros. But yeah, it's weird because like all the newspaper cuttings and stuff on the wall are of this little girl, and then when you
Yeah,
actually see Tristana Medeiros, she's not a little girl. You know who it is that plays her?
it's him. It's
It's
Lanky
him.
McGraw.
Yeah,
It's Javier Bote. Bote.
Bote. Yeah.
He's yeah. I'd forgotten that as well because
Mm.
these days he's in so many things as the very lanky, usually
Scary
quite
guy. Yeah.
disturbing chap.
And now he's the naked, like wizened, crazy, like looks like an old woman, but it's supposed to be a young girl.
Yes, that's right. And it's disturbing because I think that is his body, isn't it? More or less. I mean,
Mm.
they've obviously done some makeup and the like. But having seen him in other things, he's often used for roles like this because he is
Yeah.
incredibly skinny and very, very tall. Um, yeah, horrifying, nightmare stuff, nightmare
Yeah.
fuel. This whole thing in the darkness in the penthouse with the previously closed apartment. Um, Yeah, I think it's a great piece of work. I mean, I think I always really like the direction it goes in, which is picked up very nicely by Rec 2. I think the fact that we were almost comfortable in the fact that, oh, yeah, the 28 Days Later kind of thing, very
Mm.
good, but it's the Rage style thing. And then it shows, like you said, the wall cuttings. And now we have a story of uh, them isolating an enzyme that they were doing experiments with and mutates and behaves like the flu, and they
It's
tried to
very, it's very kind
seal
of
her up,
evil.
didn't they?
Yeah, it's kind of Evil Dead as well, isn't it? With the tape recording and the
Yes,
possession.
Entirely, yes. That's absolutely right. Yeah, I guess that's deliberate, I presume.
Yeah, it must be.
Because these guys, I mean, there's nods to different horror movies, so I guess this movie
So
is very
many.
much a catalogue of that, isn't it? And it
Mm.
works really well. I
Yeah,
always
it does
thought
so well.
that this stuff in like 40 years' time, when people are making films like Wreck, I don't know what they'll use because something like an old clunky tape recorder works really well on screen for capturing, oh, what happened before. But in the future, if it's just like someone waiting to load a download, oh, hang on a second, just got to find the file. Fucking
it,
hell.
it'll be a series of Facebook messages or something. Not quite the same impact.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas Bruce Campbell and co. in the basement in The Evil Dead with the fantastic tape recorder is such a great device, and here as well. Um, Same for vinyl. Vinyl is you always used in a creepy way in horror films, like
Oh
The
yeah.
Strain. It's never used for jollies.
Mm-mm.
I do wonder what's going to happen with that. Um, so yeah, so what's your take? I mean, well, we'll come to it too, but from what I gather, this immediately changes it. If you believe this story, it changes it to be something entirely different to what we thought it was when the film started, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And even by the end of it, you're still not entirely sure what's just happened, are you?
No.
When she just gets dragged away at the end, and you're just like, "Oh, holy hell, what's going to happen now?" No, I love all the little nods, the little quirks. Like at the beginning, everything's so relaxed. It's very real, isn't it? It is
Yeah.
almost like you are kind of doing the filming with the TV people at the fireman station and stuff. You know, they make it very realistic. How she has to like change sides and stuff because her hair isn't right and stuff like that feels like that would be the kind of stuff that would be happening, and how nervous like the firemen are, them just milling around playing basketball and stuff.
Yeah. That stuff's
It
so important, isn't it? That early
it's
stuff.
comfortable, yeah, and like you say, you know, the interviews with the little girl, which we know, like Jennifer, the little girl at the start, the whole time through the film, we know that she isn't feeling very well, and everyone's got it in the back of their mind. Oh my god, maybe it's her that's, you know, started this whole thing off, and then you find out that it's their pet dog, and you're like, oh god, it's the dog. It's then, and then the Chinese person's
Yeah.
father, he's also ill as well, so you just have no idea where it's coming from, and you have no idea where Crazy Cat Lady, who was the first person that turned, how she got it, what happened with that. Something to do with the
Yeah.
cats, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So has it jumped from animals
and
to,
and
yeah.
you still don't really know the whole way through the film exactly what's going on, but you know it's bloody scary. And it
Yeah,
does, like you
that's
say,
right.
holds up so well. You know, for something that was done in 2007, I feel like sitting and watching it, it doesn't feel like it's that old. It feels like it's
Not at
what,
all.
5 or 6 years old.
Mm, I think so. I think it's so trim. I think where a lot of the, because I've always been a fan of found footage stuff when it's done really well, and there's quite a bunch of them that are done really well. The genre tends to get a bit of criticism because obviously there's a lot of bad ones as well.
Mm.
But where it goes wrong oftentimes is if you have no one to root for, and I think they do a good job, like you said, of setting that up here. They don't waste time, so there's literally nothing in here that feels like flab.
Mm-mm.
The background stuff is either kind of explained on the move, or like you said, it's left to you to decide whether you think it's this or that, or did it start with the dog, blah blah. You like Angela, and I mean there was a
Mm.
trend in the early 2000s for downbeat endings in horror, which I always really liked because um, we went through that kind of glossy period of the Scream type stuff where everything was usually wrapped up at the end, and you know at least three people that looked like Gap models would survive for the credits.
Mm.
Um, so it was quite nice, I think, when we had more things like Hostel, where and Blair Witch was part of that too, where
Yeah.
nothing really ends up
You,
well for anybody. You know,
yeah.
it's
Yeah. Basically, by the end of Wreck, you're left thinking, well, that's it. Everyone's gone.
yeah,
Everyone's been got. I mean,
it's horrifying.
you kind of really like Pablo as well, even though you never actually see him because he's behind the camera.
Yeah, they do that quite well, don't they? There's you don't spend much time with many people here, but you kind of they're well cast. I think they're well played.
Mm.
But you kind of like them anyway. So that's, I think, a great credit to them that they're working against the odds. Really, you haven't got time to introduce everybody or fill in their backstory, but you wouldn't want to, because then the tension would be ruined.
Mm.
And the whole idea is we're watching it with them. So we've got one night in this building over whatever period of time it is. Not quite real time, I guess, because the camera is turned off, isn't it, at certain points?
Yeah, and sometimes do they do some like fast forwarding and rewinding?
They do some
times as
rewinding.
well.
Yeah, because you see the
That's
old woman.
cool.
Yeah, that's right. They do fuck around with time and stuff, which I think is really cool, because again, it puts you in the place of being with them. But yeah, man, it's such a terrific piece of work, and I think the I suppose again the Blair Witch trope of the camera being knocked to the ground at the end, and we're watching her being dragged off to her what we assume is her
Is her
death
doom? Yes,
is still really shocking.
it is.
So yeah, so Wreck is great. I mean, it's really well done, and like with a lot of these things, I think I didn't notice it much. I suppose I was watching it at home late at night, so I didn't have it massively high. But I know at the cinema, the sound was so important, because the sound design is really unsettling. They don't have a conventional music score, because
No.
found footage movies by their nature can't really, because then they take you out of it if they've got like 26 violins playing. Unless, of course, there's 26 violinists behind the camera crew that you see. But I think the sound design on Rec was something that I remember really well at the cinema, and it's really harrowing, because you've got everything happening at the same time, the people outside, the creaks of the building, and obviously the really shocking moments that take you by surprise, even on repeat viewing. So yeah. So Rec. I mean, where would you position Rec? Obviously, we'll talk about the other three films, but I mean, is this your favourite of the four, or how do you see it in terms of the quartet?
It's definitely the opening. It's the introduction for me. It's definitely not my favourite. We'll come to my favourite for sure, but I
Oh,
think it would definitely be my number two. And I feel like, well, Rec and Rec 2 literally, just meld so well together.
yeah.
I did get confused. I was a little bit like, when I was on my rewatching, I was like, well, I thought that happened in the first one. No, it happens in the second one, because that's how well they fit together. But we'll come on to that when we get to it. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
probably my number two in the ranking.
that's fair enough. Yeah. I kind of well, we'll come to the other one, but yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I think it's the if we're talking the most conventionally kind of scary ones, it's definitely the scariest one. I
Yeah,
used to think Rec 2 was the scariest one, but when I rewatched Rec 2, I thought, oh, okay, and I really like Rec 2, but I still think the first one holds up better. I'm not quite sure
yeah,
why. It just does. Um, Maybe it's because Rec 2, by its very nature, is a continuation, isn't it?
yeah. I think they kind of let a little bit more slip in Rec 2, don't they? It's more contained in the first one, like you say, just kind of left to your own devices to kind of figure out what's going on, whereas Rec 2 gives you a little bit more, which possibly kind of doesn't make it quite as scary.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed, I think, more for the rewatch for this show. Um, yeah, Rec gives you just enough. It leaves enough to your imagination. I don't know. I'm guessing they didn't know that they were coming back for a sequel. They were presumably, most films like Rec assume that there might be one, but don't necessarily plan for one.
Yeah, just kind of
Uh,
left it open.
which is good. So had Rec existed on its own, I think that would have been just a fabulous way to leave it, because
Sure.
you can make your own mind up. So Rec 2, which again, I suppose quite unusual for, especially at that time, quite unusual for a foreign language film to get a very decent cinema release in the UK. It doesn't happen that much, especially foreign language horror. Came out in 2009, so it was relatively fast tracked, and was another hit, obviously, because it led to two more. And I suppose this is one of the rare horror sequels that immediately picks up pretty much where the last one left off. There's I think that little reminder at the start, but we are on the same night. We're in the same scenario, aren't we? And this is the next part of the night, which I quite like. I mean, when you look back, I was trying to think of other horror sequels that do that, and there's not that many really.
No, I can't think of any others off the top of my head, to be fair.
No, I mean the only one I could think of immediately was Halloween 2, the Halloween 2 of
Oh,
the 80s.
yeah, of course, in the hospital, yeah.
Yeah, which basically is exactly. I mean, it picks up from where Michael Myers has come off. He's fallen off the balcony and he's gone, and it's Donald Pleasance right after that moment, which is a rare one. Otherwise, typically it's 4 years later, or some of them kind of rewrite history and pretend something didn't happen in the previous one so they can do a certain storyline. The Descent 2, I remember being really disappointed by, because that sort of says, oh, hang on, no, she survived, she's all right, she got out of the caves in the end, but now she's going back in. So hang on, no.
You wouldn't normally do that in real life.
she's incredibly traumatized, but we're persuaded to go back. There's a whole bunch of them, and then the later Halloween sequels, just get mental. And the Friday the 13th sequels, as we discussed last year, are not that bothered. They'll just say, 5 years later, Jason's back.
Yeah.
And that works really well for them. But I think for something like Rec, it's quite important that it's a direct sequel, I think, because it was so open, the way they left it. So Rec 2, again, the same two directors are back. And we've already touched upon the fact that this feels more like a video game thing, because the SWAT team. So Rec 2 is bigger than the first one, so it's got a SWAT team that's sent into the same building, and they've all got like helmet cams, which I suppose in 2009 were quite high tech. Is that right?
I would have thought so.
I didn't have a helmet cam and didn't have a helmet, but I mean, I would have wanted both. So yeah, I guess this is before GoPro. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
So the helmet cams, I suppose, is probably the best justification that they could come up with for, hang on, why is all this being filmed as well? So
yeah, well, they incorporate both, don't they? They have a dude who's filming everything, and then they can all tap in with their helmet cams as well. It's all very high tech.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And my biggest problem with Rec 2 is, I suppose, with the teenagers that show up later on who have their own camera as well. And they're kind of involved also, aren't they?
Mm.
And they're slightly annoying. I wasn't sure about the teenagers.
Yeah, but for some reason I thought they were in it more, and then on my rewatch I was like, oh god, they're hardly in it at all.
Yes,
obviously just kind of focused on it a little bit too much. But yeah, they kind of introduce another bunch of people to the mix as well.
Yeah, I think once you were there in the building in the first one, you never left. And I think the fact that they have to kind of almost cheat the premise to leave, to have the teenagers enter the building, I just thought took away some of the claustrophobia. So yeah, I mean, you get a similar kind of light-hearted start where they're talking about sports and stuff, and you're reintroduced, I suppose, to the infection idea. What I think was quite nice is you get a sense of the media circus that's building outside the building. The fact that this is a huge event that's unfolding, and had this been a conventionally shot movie, I presume they would have cut away to TV news crews and all that kind of stuff. Buildings quarantine, we're reminded of things like, we're reminded of the fact that it's spread by blood or saliva, and it's similar to rabies. But the team have I suppose, initially undercover priest with them, who is different to the first one, I guess, where it was done via the tape recordings and stuff, or news cuttings. The priest is, I suppose, Basil Exposition, isn't he? He's there,
yes,
to fill in the blanks. Which is where maybe I think I agree with you. I think this is a bit, we've got the explanation now, which I guess they had to do.
Yeah, it goes a little bit more down the religious route, which sometimes gets a bit far-fetched, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, it is him pointing out a lot of things.
That's right, yeah. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, I think he's very good, that actor. I don't know his name, unfortunately, but he's very good in that kind of role. So we are more in Exorcist territory, technically.
Yeah.
Which is a whole different thing to get your head around. And he's talking again about how they isolated, I guess, the enzyme, and they're trying to get an antidote, aren't they? And what the hook of the sequel, which I think is quite a good one. And it's another one of those plot hooks which is designed to get you back there. Why would we go back there? Oh, because we have to find an antidote.
Yeah, we have to get blood samples.
From her, from Glenn Medeiros.
From Glenn Medeiros.
He's done a cover version of Nothing's Going to Change My Love for You, and he's still up in the penthouse. he, she, I don't know. And so they need a blood sample to create an antidote to this thing that's spiraling out of control. They get some blood early on, but everything gets cocked up, so they have to go and find Mrs. Medeiros again, don't they?
Yes. Yeah, it catches fire. He tries
Yes.
quoting from the Bible, doesn't he? He puts them in a dish and quotes from the Bible, and then it catches fire. But it's not just the blood in the dish that catches fire. The whole lot goes. So they're like, ah, damn it. Now we have to go back and find more.
Now we've got to go deeper. Yeah, that's the classic sequel thing. And I get, the movie wouldn't exist if they couldn't go, slot tab A into tab B and all of that. And it's quite well. I mean, it moves quite fast, I think, apart from, like I said, it's not taking up too much time, but apart from the teenage stuff with the blow up doll and things like that.
Yeah, that kind of slows it down a bit because a lot has gone on. Lots of the SWAT team have been killed in various horrible ways. And then, they kind of like bring it down again to get the kids into the building as well.
Yeah, they do briefly take me out of it. I don't think they needed that. I guess they needed to fill in some time maybe. And
yeah, I like the plan, the fact they kind of linked it to the first one because the way the kids got into the building was following the husband of the mother and Jennifer, who'd gone to get antibiotics for the little girl to try and make her feel better. So they follow him into the building because he's adamant he's getting in there to give her these pills. I quite like that little twist.
Yeah, there are some nice touches, and it's in the line that they didn't just crank this out; they thought about it, didn't they?
Yeah,
and they wanted a kind of direct continuation, which is cool because that doesn't always happen with sequels.
No,
it's still very intense. I mean, although I don't think this holds up as well as the first one, I think it's still well paced enough, and it keeps you gripped. It's also got that same kind of anything can happen feel of the original. It took me by surprise because I've forgotten it, but there's a graphic headshot of, I guess, a possessed, whatever you want to call them, a child, quite early on where the head's blown off. That's kind of shocking.
And the firework in the face. And you spot some of the guys from the first one as well. You definitely, one of the first infected people to attack the SWAT team is Manu, the other fireman. And you instantly recognise him. But the thing that I find quite laughable about it is what I said about the setting in the first one now, how it starts off quite grand and then you get a little bit of blood. When they first go into the building in Rec 2, it's like somewhat like a fountain or something. There's just literally blood is just everywhere. It's like they've gone crazy. They went a little bit over the top. You're like, whoa.
Yeah, hang on a minute. This is not what we saw last time.
Yeah,
it's that
they kind of went a bit nuts. Yeah, a little bit of continuity went a bit wrong there.
That's the thing, and you notice it when you do watch them again in close succession.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a nice touch that they went to the effort of including those other characters. I think the firework moment, that's kind of a pretty visceral moment. It is in the category of sequels where they're like, oh, we need to up the ante so the deaths are more elaborate.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's more bloody. The gore is a bit stronger. But otherwise, it's fairly consistent. I mean, it's still the same scenario. The sense of chaos with the snipers outside and people at windows, still standing at windows, even when they're being shouted, keep away from the windows. That's still a part of it.
Yeah.
And I think the kind of messing around with the device of the cameras and stuff is really well done here. I mean, there's a lot of things that are quite realistic, like sound dropouts. There's some stuff with broken lenses. There's upside down shots, which I thought were really cool, where the camera's been turned upside down, obviously, or the camera's been dropped.
Yeah.
And I think that really does make it more claustrophobic because you're in any case, you're restricted by whatever point of view you have, whether it's a helmet camera or a handheld camera. But when you take into effect the camera's getting broken or switching off or running out of battery, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and all of that happens really in that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's really cool.
I like the fact that, one of them's broken, and then as the battery is dying, you see a figure in the doorway, kind of quite near the end, don't you? And it turns out that it's Angela.
Yes, absolutely.
And she's got Pablo's camera, so she's managed to switch onto another camera. So they have
really cool.
excuse me, the whole night vision thing as well.
Yeah, And I think that's a nice thing. I mean, I don't remember like watching trailers for Rec 2, but I don't know if they spoiled it in the trailers, but it always was a nice surprise that Angela shows up in Rec 2, because the assumption is that, she's not coming back. But yeah, I rather like that. And
Mm.
it's another kind of, it's a similar finale to the original, I guess, but it's another intense finale with a kind of toughened up Angela, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, she kind of has to take them back up to the penthouse, doesn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. And she's very good. And although she, in quite what I think is quite a nice touch, is that she essentially has that horror sequel role of the stronger, wiser, she's back, Sigourney Weaver kind of heroine. But then she ultimately proves key to basically making sure the outbreak goes outside. She's responsible for
Mm.
the what we assume will be an apocalyptic outbreak outside of the building, isn't she, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is like a really squeamish, horrible bit towards the end where you find out what happened to
Oh,
Angela in the loft, don't you? It's
oh, the
probably,
mouth to mouth.
yeah, the mouth to mouth parasite type thing. So they've put in another like twist to it as well. You're like, so you've got rabies, possession, and now this parasite is now being passed. So the parasite is like the main. Is that the demon? I was like, I'm not sure. I'm still still. By the time you get to the end of Rec 2, you're like, what the hell is it?
Yeah,
But
I
it's
still.
gross. Yeah, she kind of like Medeiros kind of like sicks up a massive parasite into Angela's mouth, so it's then passed it on to her, and she can now get out of the building. It's very clever, but yeah, that's what threw me. I kind of thought that happened in the first one,
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
and then after I'd watched the first one, rewatched again, I went, oh, but the thing didn't happen. I was like, oh, I'll stick Rec 2 on. So I did like put it on straight away after watching the first one. Oh yeah, I was like, oh, it happened in that one. I remember now.
that's the yeah, and that is another departure. Um, the parasite reminds me of the thing that goes from body to body in The Hidden, and also
Yeah,
in Jason Goes to Hell, where
yeah,
with Jason Smith. So I don't know if that's a direct lift from there, but it became a thing that pops up in. Oh, I suppose Night of the Creeps is another one with a
yeah,
parasitic.
sluggy things. Yeah,
Um, and it's gross, and I'm still not quite sure how it all adds up, but it is a good icky kind of visual. And yeah, that flash, yeah, they quite like that. And the priest, I think, is a good character. I mean, he's very much in the tradition of the intense priest from The Exorcist, I suppose.
yeah,
And I always did like the way that they set up quite early on the voice recognition software thing that
yes.
ultimately and cleverly gets the virus out of the building,
Mm.
um, which is another kind of nice downbeat ending. Um, and I always assumed that I was never sure how they were going to follow on from such an ending. But I always like the idea that it would be, wow, it's going to be mental, it's going to be massive scale, city center of Barcelona with this thing spreading from everyone to the squirrels and all sorts of things. But yeah, Rec 2. I mean, any other views on Rec 2? I think it's a very very solid sequel. It's
Definitely. It follows on so well and kind of completes it, really. It does answer a few questions. But yeah, once again, though, it's kind of has that ambiguous ending where you think, okay, so she's spoken into the radio and they're going to come and get her, but you never actually see her get taken out. So you're kind of left is the fact that did she get out or is she still in there? Which you then find out later on
yeah,
in four this time because they kind of skip one for Angela. So yeah, it wraps it up. The two go very, very well together. As you
I
say,
think so.
again, quite good characters. Possibly not quite as likable as the ones in the first one because you have the annoying kids and stuff. But the SWAT team and stuff have a great kind of rapport together, and they're all really good friends. You kind of quite like them and the way they get on.
Yeah, yeah. You get to know them enough, don't you, to make you want to root for them. Um, so yeah, I mean, Rec 2 2009 and Rec 3 is 2012. So
It is.
um, the two directors split. So what I think was quite a cool idea, the way things
Mm-hmm.
worked out, is Paco Plaza does Rec 3 Genesis and Rec 4 Apocalypse is by Balaguerro. Um, And they're two very different films, which again is quite nice, and they're both very different from the first two as well as each other. So I think the franchise did a cool thing by not just staying in the building or staying in the city or whatever, but instead cutting to, in the case of Rec 3, a story that's happening kind of somewhere else entirely with whole other characters. And yes, Rec 3 Genesis, Sarah. So tell us about Rec 3 Genesis.
I will do. As you were saying, yeah, it's set at the exact kind of same time as what's happening in the apartment building.
Yeah.
It's kind of parallel to what's going on in the apartment building. And yeah, Rec 3 Genesis is very well set up and set at a family wedding, which is really cool. This is my absolute favourite one out of the three, I have to say. I can't stress how much I love this film so much. It's so good. I love the fact that it is so different, but it does start off the same kind of way. It starts off with the found footage, and I think a wedding is a very good way to do it.
Yeah.
You have Clara and Coldo, a couple that have been together for quite a few years and now tying the knot, and they both have really big families. And Coldo's cousin Adrian is the guy who's doing the filming, so you see him outside the church, and it's all kind of normal, just kind of introducing like family members and stuff. One of the family members is Coldo's uncle, Pepe Victor. Great name. And he's kind of like, he's got a little bandage around his hand, so they just casually kind of asking, oh, what happened to your hand? He's like, I got bit by a dog. He goes, I thought it was dead, but it got up and bit me. So you're assuming then that he's some kind of vet or something like that, but he's all kind of blasé about it, and it's like, don't worry about it, I'm fine. And everything carries on, and the wedding goes ahead. You see the ceremony, everyone having a good time. At the reception, you can see the camera like flitting across to Victor, and he's starting to look a little bit ropey, but nobody cares, and everyone carries on. And then by the time it gets to the reception, he's, oh no, hang on, because Adrian has to go and interview some people, and he interviews the children's entertainer who we love. He's dressed as a giant sponge, but you can't call him SpongeBob. He has to be called John Sponge because of copyright issues. And he's basically looks like SpongeBob, just in a big round sponge costume with a little waistcoat drawn on him. And Adrian decides to go and interview him, but he's having a fag, so they have to do it outside. And while he's interviewing, he sees Pepe Victor in the background throwing up into the garden. So they all think, you know, he's had a little bit too much. But you're kind of getting the feeling now that something's going on. And then slowly in the background, as the camera pans around, you see some guys in hazmat suits kind of walking around the edge. And they're all starting to think, that's a bit dodgy, but, you know, it's a wedding, we'll carry on. As they get to the evening do, everyone's having a good old dance on the dance floor, and then Pepe Victor is sat up on the balcony. He's completely gone now. You can tell he's about to, like, change, and he just falls straight off the balcony, straight first into a table, which then stops everyone, puts them into panic mode. They start calling for an ambulance. Then he gets up and bites his wife on the neck. And then it all hell breaks loose. You get like infected, then start pouring into the wedding venue. Everyone starts turning. Coldo and Clara, bless them, get separated. So Coldo and Adrian end up in the kitchen, and that's kind of where the found footage stops, because he tells Adrian that he has to stop filming. But Adrian wants to keep filming, you know, to document what's going on, and then Coldo smashes the camera, and that's when you actually get like the title sequence to the movie as well. It's like 22 minutes in, but that's when like the things really start. But the weddings happen quite quickly. You don't find it that it drags on or anything. It kind of builds up the characters and stuff, and you get to know a few people, and then all hell breaks loose. And it's basically a kind of story of Coldo and Clara trying to find each other, isn't it?
Yeah, which is really wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. I love that moment. Like, I guess with the first two as well, I didn't see trailers or anything. I actually saw Rec 3 at Fright Fest, in whatever year it was. And there was a sense, although actually I have to say, even though I agree with you, this is my favourite too.
Yay!
I have to say, at Fright Fest, and indeed after Fright Fest, this movie isn't always loved. Like, a lot of people find this a real affront to the Rec
so
franchise,
many people hate it.
Mental.
I was looking at some reviews on it, and I was just like, I can't understand why people hate it so much. Okay,
Yeah.
They've tried to incorporate different things. They've tried to do a few different things, but it's still the same story essentially. You know, you still have there's some really good bits where Coldo manages to escape to the church part of the building, and the
Mm,
infected cannot get in there. Yeah, quite a few people have managed to get in there, and well, the ending is just great. You have a priest over the tannoy, so you
yeah,
think, you know, they've spent the whole movie trying to find each other. They've narrowly missed each other at several occasions, haven't they? You know, like Clara's been up on one floor and Coldo's been underneath, and they haven't realised that they were that close to each other and stuff. And then at the end, when they finally get together, the priest over the tannoy basically saves the day. They're just about to get eaten, and then he starts like quoting the Bible over the tannoy and stuff, which stops them in their tracks, gives them a fleeting chance to get out.
yeah.
You know, it's still the same kind of thing. It just, I mean, there's still just as much violence.
Oh, probably more. In fact, I think this is the
Yeah,
goriest one. It's
yeah,
the most splattery one, isn't it? Like
yeah. They're using like swords and hand
chainsaw.
blenders and the chainsaw. Yeah, and they're very real people, because you think Clara doesn't. Clara is incredibly scared, but then she gets faced with her mother, who's been infected. I think that's what kind of switches her to turn into a badass, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think this is great. I really do, and I think her transition into like a proper one of the great, I think, zombie movie kind of ball busting heroes or female heroes with
Yes.
the chainsaw sequence being that
Yeah.
kind of that major event is great. I love the whole thing actually. This is the one I would rewatch the most. I think especially when I rewatched Rec 2 this week, so soon after the first one, I figured, okay, yeah, this is really good. But at this point, at the end of Rec 2, I'm glad they didn't just do a Rec 3 that carries on right after this one, because I need to break from this format. And
Yeah.
there was almost a sense when I saw it, even though it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't universally liked at Fright Fest, which is mad.
Mm.
There was a sense at that point where you said I think it's about 20 minutes in, where the title finally appears, the camera gets destroyed, and again, I didn't know this was going to happen, but Rec 3 suddenly turns into this proper widescreen, normal, 35
Yeah.
millimeter movie, looking really lush, um,
Mm.
and parts of it in daylight. And you're like, wow, they've broken free of the restrictions of the
Of the
format
found
that we've
footage.
we've
Yeah.
had. Although even then, it does some really clever things. Like it cleverly uses like that. There's a night vision sequence in like the tunnel, and
Yeah.
there's use of CCTV cameras around the
Hmm.
place.
Hmm.
So it's still kind of dabbling with that stuff. But I think it's almost like they realized, yeah, Jesus, we can't string this out. But why not do this clever thing, like you said, at a wedding with
Hmm.
the funny guy, the guy that's filming it, who's a bit shit at shooting it, so it's a bit wobbly, and he's more interested
Yeah.
in like the cleavage of the
Yeah.
guests or the um and he's and there's a quite clever bit where he talks to actually a real wedding filmer
Yeah.
who's really pretentious, and he's talking about cinema verite,
Yeah.
and and like you said, it's a wedding day we all recognize. It's the crap drunk uncle
Yeah.
who turns out to be a key part of actually spreading this whole thing. So
Yeah.
not only is he that embarrassing uncle, but he's also the perpetrator of all the carnage, really.
Yeah, and
Um,
then you have the elderly grandparents as well, without their that don't turn their hearing aids on, which plays a massive part. You don't think anything of it at the time.
yes, and you know what? That's why I like this so much. I mean, it is true of the first ones as well, where they set up like for example, the voice recognition thing. They set that up early in Rec
Hmm.
2,
Hmm.
and it pays off. But the bit with Grandad's hearing aid, which pays off really well in
And
the last I don't
massively.
know, half an hour or whatever.
Yeah, you don't think about it at all until right at the end when it happens. You're like, oh my god! It's heart wrenching as well. You know, there's some absolute horrendous moments when Coldo tells Adrian to get out of the church and go to the coaches. When you think to
Yeah,
yourself, no, you want to stay in the church. They can't get in there, but they eventually manage to get out, and he watches them on the CCTV, doesn't he? Go in towards the
yeah,
coaches, and they're starting to get the infected as kind of surrounding them. They're fighting them off. They're fighting them off. You're like, yes, they're all on board. They're all on board. This is amazing. And then you watch as the door closes really slowly, and then all the infected just run on the bus, and you're just like,
oh,
oh my god,
yeah.
bad
That's
times.
great. I think the thing I would compare this to, because I never got why it had the backlash. I would understand it if this movie was like a one-trick pony. So if Rec 3, and it is at times like it's quite knockabout. It's got the John Sponge stuff. It's got the guy at the wedding that's just there because he's pointing out the songs that they can probably sue them for because they didn't
Yeah,
have royalty. Yeah,
royalties.
they didn't have
Yeah,
the rights. Yeah,
yeah. You've got
there's
the
a lot of that.
sleazy like best mate that's only there for the bridesmaids and stuff.
And that's all recognizable humor. That's not just
Yeah.
zany humor. And you've also got, I suppose, you've got more kind of crowd pleasing gore than you had in the first two. You've got more of that kind of chainsaw montage type stuff.
Hmm.
That's more Evil Dead than it is the more kind of intense wreck. But I think why it's so good and what I think people with the backlash don't really capture or maybe missed is that maybe probably closer to Shaun of the Dead is that it pulls off tonal shifts when you think, oh, this is lighter,
Yeah.
this is fluffier. It pulls off tonal shifts where you realize, oh, fuck me, no, this is really harsh, and this is still in the same
Mm.
universe as Wreck. And
Mm.
ultimately, just as like in Shaun of the Dead, when you think you know where you are, and suddenly Shaun's mum is dead, and
Mm.
you're in a very tragic place. I think this does the same thing, really, especially in the last half an hour or so.
Yeah, for
You're
sure.
rooting for the couple so much, and it takes this incredibly tragic turn, which again is really close to how downbeat the first two films were at the end, and Romero's films were obviously famously free of hope. Yeah, I think it's got all. It's got it all. It never loses sight of sympathetic characters or how serious the infection is.
Mm.
Um,
And the ending is really tragic,
it's
but
really
really,
powerful, isn't it?
but really sweet as well.
Yeah, the final shot. I think it's the final shot of the hands trying to
Yeah.
trying to link.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
See, I'm not a mushy person at all, and I hate any films like that. But I just absolutely love this one to bits
I think so.
because of all those reasons that
Yeah.
we've just discussed. And I don't understand. I guess people who loved the first two were expecting more of the same, but I think they were a little bit too quick to judge it and not pay attention to it. I'm
Yeah,
hoping
it's that, isn't it?
now, as time's gone on, they've given it a little bit more attention.
Yeah. And I think it's the classic sequel thing of you're damned if you do, isn't it? Because had they done Rec 3, Back to the Building, yeah, people would have slated it for just being repetitive. Um, but they recognized that they'd gone as far as they could with the world of Rec 2, so they had to step to the side. Like you said, something happening at the
Sure.
same time,
Yeah.
but very different characters, very different setup. Definitely a great idea to break free from the found footage, and especially in such a clever way, because it made the movie. It's a really handsome looking movie, isn't it? It's really slick.
Yeah.
It's good looking. It's got great gore effects that you actually get to see better because it's not the wobbly camera.
And it
Um,
has more going for it because because they skipped on the found footage, they can do more with the music and stuff. There's some hilarious like Spanish disco tunes. There's a Spanish version of Eloise or something going
Eloise,
on quite a lot,
the
isn't
dead.
there?
The fact that they could take that classic track and use it in such a clever way is, yeah, it's brilliant. The soundtrack is again they couldn't have done that in the format of Rec 2 because the format of Rec and Rec 2 is very restrictive, and they did a
Mm.
great job of
Yeah.
doing something so suspenseful. But here it was so necessary even to break free of that, and the fact that it all works so well, and that it is, 1 minute you're laughing at John Sponge, you know, and it's true to the premise. I quite like the idea. I'm still not sure how I feel about the whole Maria demon thing, but I quite like the idea that she's reflected when the infected look at their reflections, or they see her. We
Oh
see
yeah,
her when
yeah, that's
they look
creepy.
in the
Yeah.
reflection. There's some nice continuity, I think, but not overdoing. You could watch Rec 3 on its own, and you wouldn't need to know much really
No,
about the
about the
others.
other two. No.
But if you've come this far, I think they acknowledge that, yeah, we can't cheat completely. We have to do some kind of continuity. But it's clearly living in the same universe with like you said, with the hazmat suits and everything. It's the
Hmm.
same visuals that remind you how
This,
serious it is.
yeah, the story about the dog bite and stuff like that as
Yes,
well. There is always something that links them all to each other, which moves us on
Yeah,
to Rec 4, I guess.
it does. Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Rec 3, terrific. And it's interesting. We both said it's our favorite. I absolutely think it's the best one. Um, and Rec 4, Apocalypse, is from 2014. Sarah, take it away.
It is. And yeah, this one was done, as you say, the Rec 3 Genesis was done by Paco Plaza. So this one is Jorge Balaguerro on his own. And he has kind of gone back to the apartment and we're back with Angela and co. So we're back in the apartment. So this is another team of soldiers. I don't think they're SWAT or anything. I think they are actually properly army soldiers this time. A team of 4 of them are sent back into the building to go and bring Angela out. So this is following on from the end of Rec 2 when she's given her radio permission and stuff to say, come and get this lady out. So they've now gone in to get her. And they kind of do things quite quickly. So they're not in the building for that long, but 2 of the soldiers, I think, are killed in the process. But 2 of them escape and they manage to get Angela out. And you then kind of find them waking up on a ship. So the whole thing is that they've tried to get people out and quarantine them on this ship so they're away from the rest of civilization and stuff. And it's a ship full of the 2 soldiers that survived. Angela is there against her will, being experimented on by scientists who are trying to. I think they're trying to use her like enzymes and stuff to try and see if they can use her as a antidote, but she's not coming up as showing anything. Excuse me. You also have a nod to Rec Genesis because you have a person from the wedding as well. So we're not entirely sure that anyone really survived the wedding from the end of Rec Genesis, but this would appear that I feel like she's Koldo's mum because she keeps asking for her daughter-in-law, but she's very, very confused and doesn't know where she is. And they're all holed up on the ship to basically quarantine, and the scientists run tests, and they've managed to grab themselves some hosts that they can also use the infection on. Well, these hosts happen to be monkeys, which unfortunately, like 28 Days Later, end up getting let out basically by someone or something. And then, the infection carries on throughout the ship. And that's kind of the long and short of it, really, isn't it? Not a lot else happens. It is very actiony. There's quite a lot of gore. There's some good turning sequences. The chef guy who gets attacked by the first monkey. That's actually really gross. How he kind of puts the monkey in the pot and stuff, which then passes the infection on to other soldiers. That's kind of clever. You also have the crew that are driving the ship and nothing to do with the scientists or the soldiers, and they're all thinking that something's dodgy because they're getting their cameras blocked and stuff, so they're trying to hack into their systems to find out what's going on. And it's basically kind of a who do you trust type story, because you think you can trust one person and then it turns out that you can't. And then all goes to hell. And it's a lot more about the kind of parasite thing as well, isn't there? I'm not seeing an awful lot of religious stuff in this. There's no Bible quoting and stopping creatures in their tracks that way. It's all about experimenting and the parasite, which you think is in Angela. Because you think from the beginning she's still got it in her, but you find out later down the line that somewhere along the line the parasite has managed to change to somebody else. And that's when you starting to mistrust everyone. I was never a massive fan of this one to start off with, but I think it's because I saw it quite a lot later than I had the rest of them. And when I did my rewatch of all of these, this Rec 4 actually did make a little bit more sense to me this time around than it did the first time I saw it. So I don't hate it as much as I did, but it's still the weaker one of the 4, if you ask me.
I never gone back to it. So maybe I need to actually, but I was always disappointed by it, and I think it had a big act to follow, didn't it? Even if it was just after the first 2, it would have a huge act to follow. But because Rec 3, I think, was so refreshing, and abandoned the format of found footage, as we said, and was more playful, but it didn't lose the horror of the situation. I just found this a bit depressing that it was so formulaic, like
Yeah.
getting Angela back, um, like you said, it's more actiony and it's much more like a straightforward kind of version of The Hidden with the parasite
Hmm.
going from person to person. I'm not a huge fan of that. I thought the possession angle was one of the most interesting things about the earlier films,
Mm.
and like I said, to bring in a kind of dodgy looking lab monkey into it um, does smack a bit of 28 Days Later, which we
Hmm.
don't really need to reference. Um, yeah, I
Because
just
it's
think
not a
it's
zombie movie.
yeah, it's not a zombie movie. It plays out like a zombie movie on a boat, but it's not. um,
Yeah.
and I think even that, it all feels a bit contrived. Like I thought the third one was really bold, and I thought, what a great idea! Like you said, having it at a wedding, especially because we can all relate to that, and it's fantastic seeing that often awkward, horrible scenario of being at a wedding being trashed. Just on a basic level, it's fun for that reason. But it also has real heart, and I think the
Mm.
first two films have sympathetic characters too. But this one, I think they brought back Angela. And she doesn't really have a lot to do. She's kind of reactive, and compared to how she was originally, she was
Yeah.
you know, um, she also visibly looks quite a bit older because obviously there was a good few years between this and the first wreck. But yeah, I just think it's really by the numbers.
Yeah, very much. But
And I also,
sorry.
oh, sorry, I just wanted to say just a moan. Really, I also thought that. Um, it's called Apocalypse, but the worst thing about this, and probably the reason I never went back to it, is it has a really, really, really shit CGI effect at the very end, which looks like they were like, oh god, and they hired the people that usually do the effects for like a sci-fi channel movie to provide their final, which turned out to be the final moment in a Wreck movie, and that's really embarrassing.
Yeah. True.
So,
True. Yeah. No, you are right. Yeah.
what were they thinking?
Yeah. I mean, you do. I was you towards the end. I was definitely root for Angela to escape and stuff, and obviously she
Yeah,
does. But yeah, like they kind of just leave it that the parasite, the basically the boat goes into self-destruct, doesn't it? Someone switches the switch and blows it up basically, so they've got like
like Mission
15 minutes,
Impossible.
yeah, 15 minutes to get off the ship, and they're still floundering around with a life raft when you're like, I'm sure they said it was like 2 minutes to exploding and you've been here for about 10. Come on. But yeah, the boat blows up, but it still doesn't get rid of the parasite, which you see like really badly CGI'd swimming around in the ocean, like at the end credits, and then a bigger fish comes along and eats it, and you're just like, oh,
Oh, someone signed
really?
off on that effect. Um,
Yeah, kind of disappointed in Kwame for that.
he's a really good filmmaker. To be honest, I should have checked, but I don't know what he did after this. Obviously, I mean, I'm wondering if this was kind of underfunded. It feels a bit cheap.
Or
Um,
maybe he was doing something else at the same time and just went, oh yeah, just write the parasite floating around gets eaten by fish, done.
well, yeah, and maybe he was a bit bitter because he's like, oh, Paco's got the good one. He's got Rec 3, and I've got this one. What
Yeah.
can I do with this one?
Well, yeah. What have I got to work with here? Not a lot.
Thanks, old buddy, old pal. I think, yeah, I think, although it does make me smile, like the countdown, the auto destruct thing reminds me of old Universal horror movies like Bride of Frankenstein, where it's only at the end that you realise that the castle is fitted with a massive lever that will pull down the whole castle if you need to destroy it. It's,
Yeah.
hang on a moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's a military ship either, is it? It's just like a random like fishing or trawler trailer ship that they found. So are they all like fitted with like explosions as standard?
Yeah, if it all goes to hell. Oh, there's a
Self-destruct.
self-destruct button.
Yeah, every
Um,
boat should have one.
And I like the fact that they thought it was a feasibly good idea to put the infected on this. But and what could go wrong? We've got a monkey, and
Yeah.
I'm sure the chef will be okay. Um, it's a bit of a shame, but I'm glad you liked it more on repeat viewings.
Yeah, the action is definitely enjoyable, and there's some fun kills and some gross stuff going on, and a little bit of a kind of who done it type thing. You know, who is it? Who do we trust? Who do we not? I quite like that aspect to it. But yeah, as you say, the ending kind of does bring it down a bit.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame because it is. I don't know if, I mean, it was a while ago, I suppose now, but I don't know if there's plans to do anything more with Rec. These things have a habit of coming round again.
Reappearing, yeah. Who knows?
But
Like you say, as you mentioned it earlier with the GoPros and stuff. You know, maybe that'll be the next one.
yeah, you never know. It's an interesting idea, and it's a shame in a way that they did kind of throw it away with the fourth one, with just focusing on the physical parasite rather than I
Mm,
suppose the implications of what they were talking about with demonic possession was quite interesting because it twisted on something different to the usual body
yeah.
jumping or even fast zombie type thing
Mm.
that these films do trade in a bit. Uh, yeah, it's a shame. I wouldn't want them to, because I fear they'll just go and do a remake of Wreck. We don't want that, but it would be interesting if they did a continuation somehow.
Yeah, another kind of thing similar to Genesis, I reckon. Another outbreak happening parallel to those events or something
Yeah, and I suppose we've seen that,
further
haven't
on in the
we?
sea.
Yeah, because that's a great idea of Genesis, is to say, oh, meanwhile at this wedding,
Mm,
um, and I suppose we've seen the equivalent to that recently, where things like The Walking Dead have splintered off into spin-off
mm.
shows, which reveal stuff happening before, after, during events that we've been watching on that original show. So I suppose that's a nice way of getting around having to bring back certain characters and all that,
Mm.
but still carry on the same plot line. Um, yeah, well, we shall see. But yeah, so the order you'd put them in, we've established that three is your favourite. What would be the order of the other three?
Definitely, yeah. It would be Brick Genesis first, then the first one, straight into the second one with Apocalypse being last.
Yes, I think that's the same as me actually, because the first one is great, but Genesis is just the most fun.
Yeah,
And
I'm so glad that you like Genesis as much as me.
it's
It's
just the
good
best.
it's good to find someone else. I think we might be the only two people that love it quite this much. If there is anyone
Which is
else
really
out there that love
shocking.
it, please let us know. We need more
That would be
people.
great. I think so. Like I said, I was lucky enough to see. Well, I saw the first three Recs in cinema, but the third one in a festival, which is often the best way of watching something. And the good thing about Rec 3 Genesis and the way it played, I think, is that it did have those big crowd pleasing chainsaw type moments. So those things will always get a cheer. But like I said, there was a sense from some of the audience that they were like, "Oh, this is a cheat," which I totally disagreed with.
Yeah,
Uh,
bad people. And one of the other things I've always noticed about the Rec movies as well is that I mean I've never had a problem with subtitles. I'm quite happily,
hmm,
read
yeah.
subtitles. Um, but these ones flow really well. You don't even half the time really realise that it's in Spanish, do you? Or I
No,
don't.
not at all. No.
And there
And I
is a
think
lot.
that's great.
Yeah, there's loads of people out there that won't watch them because of the subtitles, which I just think is just sad. There's so
It is
many
mad, isn't it? Yeah.
good zombie movies or other movies out there from other countries that have the subtitles. They're just as good.
Yeah. I always thought that the rec films would travel really well because there isn't a huge amount of dialogue,
Mm,
but
you
it
kind of
moves really
get what they
fast.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. I suppose the third one is probably the one where there's quite a lot of humor that would be lost if you weren't following the subtitles. But I never struggled with that kind of thing like
No.
you. If the film's good enough, it doesn't matter to me if it's
Mm-mm.
if it's subtitled or not. I will be carried along if it's strong enough. And it's a bit of a shame, although it does quite nicely bring us neatly to the movie they made for people that don't want to read in the cinema, which is
Yes.
America. Hollywood,
Yeah,
thank you
yeah.
for very swiftly giving us Quarantine, which came out
Hmm.
in 2008. So pretty soon after the
The
original
first
Rec.
one, yeah.
Um, and this is quite interesting, I suppose. It's directed by John Eric Dowdle, and I believe he did. I was thinking of this earlier randomly. He did a found footage movie called The Poughkeepsie Tapes,
Uh-huh.
which is really, really disturbing, and I don't think it's ever had a release over here. But it's a very kind of voyeuristic following of a serial killer via found footage, and it's extremely disturbing. I don't think it's very graphic. I don't remember it being very gory, but it puts you in the position of being right there where some maniac is stalking and killing people. So it's an interesting choice that he graduated to a found footage American remake of Wreck in the form of Quarantine. Um, this is one I saw in the cinema. What about you? Did you see this on the big screen or caught up with it later?
Yeah, no, once again, I was kind of behind on this. I mean, I'd already seen Wreck, and I think I was just like, nah, I don't need to see another remake of it. So I did leave it a
Yep.
few years before I actually sat and watched it, because I was just such a massive fan of the Wreck movies. I was like, I don't see the point of why you would want to just remake it just so people don't have to read subtitles. But I think they did quite a good job with it. It is the same, isn't it? I don't think it quite goes into the Medeiros character as much, but it is featured obviously because it is the same. It kind of goes more. I feel like from the film, having rewatched it again recently, it goes more along the lines of the dog's rabies type
Mm,
thing, doesn't it? It tries to put you
yeah.
on that track more. I mean, it's got some recognizable characters in it. You've got Dennis O'Hare makes a little appearance, but he's not in it for much. He's a bit of a dick in that. The random appearance of Greg German as the Doctor, and then you've got Jennifer Carpenter as Angela, who's not the same.
Yeah.
She's very screamy. That was my problem with it. She's very screamy, and the whole bit at the fire station and stuff beforehand is not quite as slick as it is in Wreck. It's not quite as relaxed. It feels a bit more
Mm.
staged.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, isn't it? That she does fall to pieces in Quarantine, which I suppose is realistic, although a bit grating.
Mm.
Because it was in this era where you'd expect, especially an American remake, you'd expect an American remake of something like Wreck to go more along the lines of female characters that were in mainstream Hollywood films, Hollywood horror films at that time, which were the kind of ball busting, Buffy style, vest
Yeah,
wearing,
yeah,
people like Jessica Biel in Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake,
yeah,
that kind of character. Whereas they went in the other direction with her being in a kind of sustained hysterical state.
yeah,
I'm not sure about her. She is a good actress, isn't she? Because she's in a few different things, like
yeah.
Dragged Across Concrete. I saw her in recently, and a bunch of stuff. But probably not a lot to work with, I guess.
No, no. So, yeah, I mean, it's just not as good if you ask me.
Hmm.
It doesn't have quite the same feel. It does have that very American-y feel to it, doesn't it? Where it's all a bit more staged.
Yeah, it's not as scary. The other one felt a bit like you really were watching something that was out of control, and this is maybe is very slick, but maybe
Mm.
too slick in a way. And it does. It's interesting though, isn't it? That in place of familiar, terrifying, skinny, lanky Javier Botet, you have Doug Jones as the skinny,
Yeah,
scary, horrifying,
yeah.
emaciated
But
zombie,
he's
not zombie thing.
not in it as much. No, it's not quite as much of a focus on him.
No, it's not quite the same. Um, and I remember Quarantine actually very well because the fact that its trailer gave away the very last scene. It showed the last shot basically. The trailer cleverly ruined the ending of Quarantine for anyone that hadn't seen Wreck,
Yeah.
which I think saved people the money of buying the ticket, so they stayed at home instead. Counter marketing. Um, yeah, so it's not like I think it's in the category of if you like and you've seen Wreck, you don't need to really watch Quarantine. Um, but it's one of the decent ones, isn't it? It's not
It's
bad.
all right, yeah. Yeah, it's all right. It's just how the Americans just tend to turn things out, isn't it? Good, but
Yeah,
not quite the same.
I think it
Um,
was the same with a lot of those, and we may be sort of dwelling on this next time. But you watch a few of them, and there's oftentimes they're not bad films, like things like the Ring remake and Dark Water remake. Um, they're not bad films, but something's missing in the translation. You know, there's a reason
Yeah.
that, for example, Ring worked so well set in late 90s Japan, or
Mm.
Rec worked so well set in Barcelona with this Spanish cast. You know, it's something that stood
Mm.
out for all those reasons and others as well. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't ever hear anybody talking about Quarantine like the non-Rec fans. I think it's just disappeared into history.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, just
but it did
being
spawn a
the one
sequel.
that's like him. Yeah, yeah. Quarantine 2 came out in 2011, or Quarantine 2 Terminal as it is, which is basically, it's not a follow-on or anything to the first Quarantine, to be fair. It's still the same infection, which in this case is taken onto a plane in the form of rats, which are masquerading as hamsters. Um, yeah,
It's,
far-fetched, I know. But yeah, it's not like Rec 2 is like the follow-on from Rec. This is nothing like that. It is basically just the same kind of infection, only this time it's brought onto a plane. There's some fun bits with a really overweight man that becomes infected whilst the plane is up in the air. I was thinking that the whole thing would be on a plane, but it's not. The plane lands very quickly and they end up quarantined in the terminal. And yeah, all kind of hell breaks loose, and you kind of find out that one of the passengers who you thought you liked was actually an evil scientist who's actually trying to spread the disease around the world and stuff, and cause mass chaos for the governments and everything, bring down the governments and stuff. Yeah, it gets a bit political. But no, it's quite good fun, and I would actually say it's probably a little bit better than Quarantine in terms of gore, and there's some very squeamish effects. It doesn't have any like massive names, but it does have the main woman in there, Mercedes Mason, went on to go into Fear the Walking Dead.
okay. I know I recognise the name.
Yeah. But yeah, it's good fun, but yeah, it's nothing really to do with any of the Rec movies or even the Quarantine movie. But it's good fun. If you haven't seen it, give it a quick watch. I quite liked it.
Yeah. I was actually I'd forgotten about Quarantine Terminal. I knew I'd watched it, but couldn't remember anything, which is entirely normal if you're me and you forget what happened just 10 minutes ago. So I checked out, and this is a good plug for the website as well. I actually did the Rec films for Franchise Corner about 100 years
Nice.
ago.
Mm.
Now available and visible on Horror Screens Video Vault website, and do check it out. Franchise Corner has a whole bunch of our favourite and less favourite franchises, and Rec is among them. And I checked out my review of Quarantine Terminal because I remember nothing about it. And guess what, Sarah? It turns out it looks like I liked it.
Oh, yay.
3 stars,
Oh, that's
mid-range,
not
not
bad. Yeah,
bad.
yeah. Same. I would
And
probably have given it that as well.
yeah, cool, man. And there I am, younger version of me. Don't know how long ago this was, but I'm there talking about the stock bunch of disaster movie characters: pregnant woman, fat guy, flirty flight
Yep.
attendants, old guy with Parkinson's, um,
Yes.
emergency landing, a problem described as some fucked up people rabies spreading inside. The officials just as much of a threat as the infection itself. Sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but something I'd totally forgotten about was its own virus mythology, revealing it as a man-made creation of a doomsday cult.
That's it. Yeah.
Injecting antidote into it and ditching the shaky cam of the earlier film.
Yeah.
Um,
The bit where he injects himself with the antidote is it was a hand
into
in
his
front of
eyes.
my eyes, look through my fingers thing. Yeah, he injects himself into his own eyeball, but it still doesn't work. The antidote doesn't work, and he still turns. So you're just
The
like
dedication.
all that for nothing. Ow. Yeah, that's really squeamish. That's really bad. Proper
I
made me
have a real
cringe.
problem with eyeball violence.
Eyeballs. Yeah.
Yeah, eyeballs and teeth. That's me looking the other way. Um, and it's funny because I look, and the final thing I said in this is entirely kind of what you said, which is uh, the viewpoint that a subplot involving lab rats masquerading as hamsters with tails inadvertently plays out like a horror movie remake of the Basil the Rat episode of Faulty Towers. So there we go. That's a classic flashback. Yeah, Quarantine 2 Terminal. So not a bad movie.
No,
Um,
but
in
not a
fact, none
patch
of
on the
these
Rec
are.
movies.
No, absolutely. They're a hard act to follow.
Mm.
Um, They had a go. But I think, the Wreck movies, the first three especially, are the kind of movies we'll return to in years to come.
Sure.
But
I
out of
do
all of them,
watch.
it's three.
Yeah, definitely. That is one that I often return to, and if I was to write like my top 10 list of zombie movies, that would be up there and definitely in the top 5 for sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it, that um, I would always consider these films, even though I know they're technically probably not. I'd always put them in zombie genre, and I think that's where
Sure.
they're pegged, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the safest place to put them at.
Because
You
they're
know, they're rabid, they try and eat you, and they can pass on the virus
yes,
from those ways. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's about as much zombie as it gets, really. It's the
and
main
yeah,
premise.
I think that's it. It's the language of a zombie film. It's spread like a zombie. They look like zombies.
Mm.
Same with 28 Days Later, I guess, where
Yeah.
that movie was more pompous, or at least the people that made it were more pompous about, oh, it's not a zombie movie. It's,
Yeah.
it's a drama about our times. Whereas I think the Rec guys are more obviously horror film fans that probably just wanted to throw loads of stuff into the pot. A bit of Evil Dead, a bit of The Exorcist, a bit of
Absolutely.
George Romero.
Yeah.
Um,
And just have loads of fun with it. I mean, I was watching there was a making of documentary on my version of Wreck Genesis, and I was looking through that, and they were just saying, they call them zombies
yeah,
when they're like auditioning and stuff like that, and they totally have them acting like zombies. They spent a long time trying to like finalize the noises that they make and stuff, using like a combination of animal noises and human noises, all that kind of stuff. So I mean, they put a lot of effort into it, and they do call them zombies, so that's what they are.
that's great. Yeah, that makes a difference, I think, because they're conscious of that. This fits into 100 years of zombie movies and delves into a few other subgenres at the same time, which is cool. Well, that was rather good, I thought. The Rec films, they're all available. Rec, the original, just had in the UK and I think the US as well, had a nice new release by Arrow Video, which I think ports over a lot of the extras from the old DVDs. And I would imagine the other ones will probably be at some stage involved in some kind of box set situation.
Oh, I hope so. That would be amazing.
I have a feeling there is a box set, but I think it's an American. I've got a feeling there is one of all four. I don't know who put it out, but there's one out there, and there'll probably be one out in the UK sometime soon. But do check them out. Check out Franchise Corner on the website for the breakdown of the movies themselves. That's just about it, really, from this episode. We're going to be back in March. In fact, on the 26th of March, which seems like ages, but as we know, time is just a blurry thing, and before you know it, it'll be with us. And we're going to be talking about I suppose, an always contentious subject that we've touched upon today with Quarantine and Quarantine 2, which is horror remakes. So you'll have your own views about remakes, about, are they good ones? Which ones are the best ones? But we'll be focusing really on the remake side of things. So there is not much to be gained from us spending 2 hours talking about Halloween. But there is something to be gained by us looking at the remakes of movies like Halloween. So we're touching on a whole range of them. It's so new that we haven't yet decided which ones we'll be talking about, but you can guarantee there'll be some remakes of classic horror films in there. And we'll be deciding what are our favourite horror remakes as well. So it should be fun, right?
It's going to be very exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Already just deciding which place to put the 2013 Carrie remake on my top 5 all-time remakes, and the great remake of John Carpenter's The Fog.
Oh, yes.
People are always talking about. And the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street. That's another great one. But
I think our lists might be slightly different this time then.
Oh, right. Okay. There's the great Psycho remake with wanking Norman Bates. Which,
yes. That's my number one.
Oh, crumbs. That's an embarrassing match. Oh, well. It is great. Vince Vaughn is Norman Bates.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so that's going to be quite cool, actually. Something a bit different. Remakes of horror, classic and not, coming on the 26th of March. But otherwise, that's it for today. Hope you've enjoyed it. Obviously, check out the website and write in if you've got any suggestions for future episodes, or if you just want to say something like Wreck 3 is terrible. We'll obviously ignore those and throw them away.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anything else from you today, Sarah?
No, that's all good. It's been a great episode. Wreck movies are some of my favourites, so it's been a lot of fun talking about them. And yeah, I could talk about Wreck Genesis for ages. So if anyone else wants to talk about it, just let us know.
Yeah, I think so. Fun movies to revisit. So all that remains to say really is to say thanks for listening. And as we said earlier, every conversation in 2021 has to end with something ominous like stay safe over the upcoming weeks, look after yourselves, and all that. And take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.